Hey guys, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. It is raining pretty hard outside, so if you hear something in the background, my mic might be picking that up. But anyway, I am talking about The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind by William Kamkwamba and Bryan today. So this is like an assisted autobiography or assisted memoir, however you wanted to think of it. Because William Kamkwamba, English isn't his first language, so I imagine that's why he had some literary assistance from Malawi, the country of Malawi. This book was pretty popular about 10 to 15 years ago, I believe, and it's still standing the test of time in the bookstores. It's still there every time I go, and there's a children's version that's still being sold, so it is certainly one that's continuing to be relevant, and one that, before doing this Reading the World project, I probably would have written off as something I wasn't interested in, and I stand very corrected. Reading it was incredibly engaging, enlightening, heart-wrenching at parts, inspiring, and a story that I felt at this time that I really enjoyed, which is one that is about how science can change people's lives for the better in the poorest, one of the poorest of the poor places on earth. And I mean, this is in the author's own words. He basically, in one of the things I saw of him speaking, he says, I was from a poor family in a country of poor farmers. They have no electricity, constant threat of famine. There's even a hunger season as he's growing up, where people are preparing to be hungry for many months at a time. Epidemics, cholera, malaria. His village is just quite isolated, and they have to basically go to another town even to get electricity. So he grows up in this environment with all these challenges, as well as the fact that a true famine hits once a government comes in that removes subsidies on fertilizers. His family's money is completely drained, and he can't even go to school. So he gets some books from the library and self-teaches himself about electricity, physics, everything he needs to know to build this windmill. I guess a film was made of this as well, which I haven't seen, so maybe some of you have seen that, but this windmill is built basically out of scrap metal and bike parts and whatever he can find, and the whole journey and the challenges and people mocking him, his family mocking him, all he has to do just to build this thing, multiple steps of course, but all of this just to light up a single car light in his room. So one bulb, all of this for one bulb, the very first bulb in the entire village. But it attracts the attention of a teachers organization in his country, which leads to him eventually going to Tanzania for a TED convention. You remember the TED Talks? Are those still a thing? I mean, I remember it was something that was, all over the place 10 years ago, but yeah, so that's kind of how he became well known, and then got a lot of funding to start his own NGO, where he's still, from what I can tell, from what I researched, doing a lot of good work in Malawi and Africa as a whole today. So, yeah, William Kamkwamba, if you don't find this man's story somewhat inspiring, I don't know what inspires you. And there's so many things that I thought about and want to talk about, but I'm going to just try to go one by one. The book starts with sort of this layer of superstition and folklore that's kind of surrounding the daily activities of his family as he's growing up. He talks about, hunting birds and the maize. They make sort of a paste that's sort of their daily food, but then there's also a lot of yeah, folklore that he talks about, stories that are from his village, and I always like that stuff. I think that's a nice touch, but it does sort of it sets the stage for the idea that education and science is kind of like behind in this village in some ways. So, well, in every way. So anyway, going forward, he has a really good friend who's going to be instrumental in actually finishing the windmill. And the part of the book that really got to me was the famine. And it's going to sound, I feel like I'm going to say something just totally cliche here, but it impacted me so much, this part about the famine. Like, I read Knut Hamsun's Hunger, and while that gave me an idea of what it's like to, like, be going crazy and really hungry, that's like what the book's about on a physical level. There's a lot more going on, of course, too. But that doesn't even come close to this sort of, famine when everybody around you is suffering from hunger. This is a kind of suffering that it was to the point, like, I can barely stand just knowing and thinking about that anyone in the world might still be suffering like this. I mean, the hunger, it just seems like the most painful, torturous, prolonged, horrible thing for a person to go through. And I mean, I'd never really conceptualized or thought about it or really internalized that idea like that, how physically and mentally and whatever tormenting that prolonged hunger is. This part of the book really got to me, really got me to just look around and kind of be like, wow, it puts things in perspective. I feel like, I don't know, anything else I say is just trite and cheesy, but I think you kind of know where I'm going with that. And it makes me think about, what can I do? What should I do and what can I do? Because, there's some sort of thoughts about, like, I can't stand to, like, live such a good life. Well, some people have it way better than me, but a lot of people have it a lot worse than me, sort of thing. But my life being worse doesn't necessarily make someone else's life better, but it's also like, what can I do? What should I do? So those kind of thoughts is what I'm kind of getting at. So the other thing is, I don't know how much the marketing of this book really does it justice. Like, I love the fact that it's a hopeful story about how science and education can change someone's life and a whole village's and many people's lives for the better. But it's like, I also can't forget about all those people that just, died miserably of hunger, and like I'm sure there's a certain kind of person that can look at this book and see it as like, and maybe even William himself sees it as like, God was there. There was some kind of divine meaning behind him coming out of this, and I wouldn't want to take that away from anybody who believes that. But I also can't help but think that, like, no, what's really important here is the science, is the light bulb. And for all kind of the stuff I say sometimes about, reason and progress, the obsession with reason and progress and scientific advancement is, like, not good, because it gives us, like, atom bombs and weapons of destruction and stuff, and we lose some of our humanity in it, and we literally lose the humanities, like books and history, in our pursuit of it. Like STEM in the United States, everything is about STEM, or has been. I don't even know what the education system is like anymore, so I can't really talk about that. But you know what I'm saying. But yeah, for all that I say about progress and reason being kind of you don't want to be too obsessed with that. It's like, we need it. We need science. We need, we, like, we can't take light, electricity for granted. We can't, we wouldn't want to live without this stuff. We really wouldn't. And like medicine and, the stuff that they go through in this book just reminds you to be grateful on some level for the science we have and start, I mean, for me anyway, it's helping me kind of get together in my mind more of a perspective, I guess, I don't know, pragmatic perspective of like, everything in science is a tool and it's how we use it. And of course, like, to talk about science as a whole is kind of probably useless. There's good ways to use science. There's good science. There's bad science. It's like, it's too much to just say progress in science is good or bad, right? A lot of obvious things. I feel like I'm just saying the obvious here. But, yeah. The other thing about this book that I want to say is the marketing. So, like, for example, there's a quote from Al Gore on the back, which is like, it's fine, I got nothing against it, but that, like, immediately politicizes the book in a way which needlessly, and that's, of course, just a publishing or marketing decision. And it's a shame that in the United States, like, science has to be, like, politicized. It has been. So, and also just looking at it as an inspiring story, I feel like is missing some big points. Like if you focus on this book only as just like, wow, an inspiring story of this heroic boy who is now a man who I mean, don't get me wrong, he did more than I certainly could ever have done in his situation. Obviously somebody very gifted and went through a lot and overcame a lot. But I don't feel that is really the point. The point is to show like what could be done if people in these poor areas of the world were given the tools needed to thrive. How many Williams did we lose in that famine? How many Williams are we still losing, maybe not only in poor areas of the world, but in the United States, because we fail to properly support education and scientific thinking? Like, it's not, to me, the theme that I took the most away from this book isn't like this hero worship or this feeling of like, wow, what a divine gift that this one person, managed to come out of it and now he's doing all this good. Like that, sure, that's part of it, but like I feel like the most important thing is that reality of like, the sobering part of the book. That's the word I've been looking for this whole video, is that the book was just very sobering, very sobering. And the other thing it makes me think of is that, like, literature. What makes great literature? Okay. Like, I love my postmodern experimentation, my deep philosophy, my romanticism infused great novels and all that stuff. But when it comes down to just like a story of someone who just like barely survived, that fought so hard to become something and almost didn't, and represents, thousands, maybe millions that are lost like him because they never had the chance. I don't know. It just makes me look at some of my favorite books and go like, these books are completely meaningless to people, to these millions of people who are in this situation. They do no good for the... And actually, even Ernesto Sabato talks about that in Angel of Darkness is the English translation, or Abaddon el Exterminador. He makes a remark very early on in the book, as himself in his own book, that no book ever saved somebody from hunger. And it just makes me question, like, but is that true? Is that true? Because, I bet for the amount of money that his NGO has made, and what they've done with the money, I don't know, but I am going to assume the best and assume good things. This book might have actually saved many people from hunger, or other issues, or improved many lives simply by the perspective that it brought to people. And so it's a different way of thinking about literature, and I don't want to think of all literature needs to be purely functional. So only functioning for society. That's like an extreme, I suppose, traditional left-wing viewpoint of it, that like literature is only a social function, right? I don't take that stance. What I'm trying to say is that different literatures, different books, different fiction or nonfiction, it means different things to different people. And maybe I'm just more sorting out my own thoughts here. I'm not like talking to anybody in particular. Just kind of expressing my thoughts as I always do on my videos. But all that stuff is what's meaningful to one part of the world or one society is not going to be meaningful to another, right? And I think that's a good reason to read translated literature, to read the world, and not just be in the box of the Western canon. Or whatever, or any box. But, you don't necessarily have to do that through literature. You can also experience the world and other people's perspectives in many other ways besides reading too. But, yeah, so that's my discussion on The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. Another difficult one to talk about, but this is kind of the end of the cycle of books of memoirs. I've been doing a lot of memoirs, a lot of autobiographies lately, and I purposely kind of grouped them all together. But next I have a fun one for an author that I've already covered, but it may take a few days to do it, or I may do something else if it takes longer than I thought. But yeah, so we're going to be going back into kind of pure fiction, and there may be one or two memoir autobiography things in the future, but we've really gotten through almost all of them that I plan to read for this Reading the World project. So from now until the final country of 170, or maybe it'll go to 172, we're going to be looking at pretty much pure fiction, folklore, myths, and not really any more non-fiction or biographies or memoirs or things of that nature. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.